Hi guys, we're running a couple of minutes late, so I do apologise. I'll get started now. My name's Matt Smith, I work for the Osprey Group, and I'm here to speak to you today about simplifying sling specifications. I'm sure you're all aware of the dozens, if not hundreds, of different varieties of slings that are out there. In my opinion, a lot of them aren't necessary, and I think we can do things much simpler, and that's what we're going to speak about today. So just to start with, a little bit of background on the company. We're made up of 3 different companies: Osprey Healthcare, the Osprey Sling Company, and Timo UK. Timo does the trolleys and the height adjustable benches and whatnot. We offer a wide range of products covering most of the UK. Been around since 2008. You may not be too familiar with the name down this part of the country, and the main reason for that is we didn't have a rep in the south until I started in May last year. So fingers crossed you'll start seeing the name pop up more and more as time goes on. Free assessments everywhere in the UK. Everywhere in England and Wales, with some dealers elsewhere in the UK. So this is what we're going to discuss today. The first thing, why are there so many different styles of sling? Then we're going to speak about something I'm calling the spectrum of suitability, because I think it sounds quite clever. Just a different way of thinking about slings, and hopefully should simplify things a little bit. We're going to look at the 3 main categories of slings and where they sit on the spectrum, some common variations of those slings, and then I'm going to take some questions afterwards. Okay, so to start with, why are there so many different styles of sling? As I say, there are 3 main categories that we're going to look at in a minute, and really everything else is a variation on those. And those variations have come about through people trying to innovate, to improve on those designs. But what tends to happen is someone will release a sling that does something better, but because of the old slings are still in a lot of people's contracts, they stay around as well. And that's when you tend to find the catalogue start to get bloated with 20, 25 different slings. Many of them all do exactly the same thing. So we'll try and break it down and look at it a bit clearer. So this is the spectrum. And what this is designed to show is you've got on the left-hand side slings that have less material. So your toileting style slings is what we're looking at here. They're easier to fit and remove, very easy to do in a chair, even a moulded chair sometimes. They give a lot more access. But they are less comfortable and they provide less support. And obviously we have the opposite on the other end. Now the reason I've drawn this out this way, I often have people ask me, I want a toileting style sling, I want that much access, but I'm slipping through it, I need some more support behind it. And what I think this does is it highlights the fact that the further you move away from one side, the closer you are to the other. So if you give more access in a toileting sling, more access on a universal style sling, it inherently becomes less supportive. There's going to be no magic bullet that anyone can come up with that's going to give you all the access you need, but it's also going to be very comfortable and appropriate for everybody to use. Okay, so the 3 main types of sling: toileting sling on the left-hand side, hammock style slings on the right-hand side. We will go into these in some more detail. And everything in between that is a universal style sling. Okay. So we'll look at toileting slings first. This is what they look like traditionally. Some variation on this shape, sort of an N shape like this. Arm comes underneath the arms here with a chest band usually. Modern ones on the other side, that's our Hygiene high back. As you can see, the back on that comes up a lot higher, and there are also extensor loops on that because there's more material to work with. They both do almost the exact same job. Whilst it could be argued that the newer one does provide more support, it does, but only in the back section. If you've got somebody that's slipping through a toileting sling, putting that Hygiene high back in place is going to make no difference to that whatsoever. It's not. All that's going to do is spread the weight more evenly across the back section and therefore be more comfortable for some people. So yeah, obviously these styles, loads of access, easy to fit. Downsides to them, you must have good core strength to be able to use them appropriately, because if you don't, if you can't extend your legs out, all that's going to happen is your bottom's going to slip through the sling. It can be very unsafe, very dangerous. We tend not to specify too many of these anymore for that reason. As I say, what we often find is carers absolutely love these slings, they want them everywhere, but if you put them in, even if it is appropriate when you specify it, unless it's reviewed in a timely manner, you might find someone deteriorates to the point where they should no longer be using that sling, but it's still in use, and that's how people get hurt. So I say, we tend to stick away from these ones. On the other end of the spectrum, on the right-hand side, we have hammock slings. the more keen-eyed among you will probably notice that these are actually in situ slings, and we will speak some more about that in a second. But a hammock sling is typically something with a square or rectangle shape. The idea of it is it comes all the way up to the nape of the neck, all the way down to the back of the knee, and it's very, very easy to sit in, gives you lots of support. You don't have to make any conscious effort to it. You can really relax into the sling, and you're always going to be safe in that. You know, it's one of the safest styles of sling that are out there. Traditionally, hammock-style slings didn't have these pommels on them. It was just a square of material, and you could cross them over to create some tension around the legs. These are slightly more recent, but even these, we tend not to use these pommel styles very much anymore. We use the split leg style over there. So I know it does look like that's got an aperture on it. It's not an aperture. It's just designed to split around the legs so it can give individual support and spread the weight more evenly and be more comfortable. Okay. These are on the far right-hand side. Downsides to them, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to fit in a chair. If you've got somebody that needs to be toileted from the sling, trying to remove that and then put it back into position on the chair is very, very difficult to do. Almost everyone always gets into and out of these on a bed. Okay. And then in between that, anything that isn't on either end is a universal style sling. And this is where you'll find the most variations of different styles. Our company produces 8 different styles of universal sling. A lot of the other companies are similar. This is where all the variation comes in. So you can identify them from their hybrid shape. Let's say you've got a fair amount of material at the top, much more than with a toileting sling, but you've still got the longer leg sections here. This is a very traditional style universal sling. You won't see many of these around anymore. We've sort of moved over to what's called a universal deluxe, which is on the other side. They're slightly wider around the legs. They tend to be a lot more comfortable, and they can be easier to fit in place as well. As I say, they do sit, these styles particularly, pretty much bang in between the other two. So you can use these for toileting. It's not the easiest thing to do. You can get them in and out in a chair, as long as the chair isn't moulded probably. But it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. But it's a good middle ground between the two of them. I'd say these are probably the most common styles of sling that you'll see out there. Now, the point that I want to make about the variations of the universal style sling, for instance, our valet sling, you may have seen one around this morning. It looks almost exactly like that, but the aperture comes up a little bit higher, and it's got little holes just above where the aperture sits. The idea being that you can reach your hand through to remove people's clothes when they're sat in the sling. The aperture comes a bit higher, so it's easier to get the access to it. Now, you may think, okay, whereabouts does that sit on the spectrum? It is to the left of universals, but the point I want to make is it's nowhere near halfway between toileting and universal. It is very much just to the left of universal. And you'll find that with any sling, in my opinion, that claims to be bridging the gap between one of the two sides, it is very, very close to one end of it. There really isn't anything you can do that goes directly between the middle of them. Okay. So let's look at some common variations of those slings. So we'll start with the hammock style and in situ slings. Almost all modern hammock slings that you find will be in situ slings now. The main reason for that is because of hammock slings are so difficult to put on and remove. If you're putting someone in a chair, ideally you want something you can leave in underneath them. So we'll talk briefly about what makes a sling an in situ or a leave-in sling. So the first part of the equation is the material that it's made out of. It must be a breathable material that doesn't compress fully, so it still allows air to get through to keep the body cool. The other part of it is the shape of the sling. It's very important that we don't have any seams between high pressure points of the body and the sling and the surface we're sitting on. Because if you've got a leg seam right here, for instance, you're still going to get a pressure sore, because if it's not the soft material, it's still going to cause problems. It is. The sling itself actually provides very little inherent pressure benefit. All it does is it preserves the pressure benefit from whatever you're sitting on. Okay, so you can't put it between a hard seat and expect it to make a difference. Finally, on the in situ slings, I've been requested quite a few, and you will see some around with an aperture cut out here, so you can use it for toileting. So if you've got someone that needs to use a hammock sling, but they want to use the toilet on it, or they need to use the toilet on it, that's often suggested as a solution. Now, I have done a couple of them, but I'm always wary to do it. And the main reason being, you're introducing a seam right around the bottom. So when people ask me for it now, what I say is, yes, we will do it for you, but don't use it as the in situ sling. Have a separate in situ sling that you're sat in all the time, and then when you need to use the toilet, transfer to a bed, change into the one with the aperture. do the toileting, and then change back out of it. So as I say, it can be done, but it's really not an in-situ sling at that stage. Okay. Extensor loops versus standard loops. Most standard slings that you find will have this style of loop on them. The idea of that being you can control the position in the sling quite easily. If you make the shoulder strap shorter, you're going to be sitting more upright in the sling. Make them longer, you're going to recline some more. They're good for controlling position. However, if you've got somebody that does go into an extensor whilst they're in the sling, what will happen is they'll push against the backrest, the back part of the sling won't give, and the sling will start to ride up their legs. What can happen in extreme cases, you'll see people that do that so severely, they're actually almost standing up in the sling and dangling from it and balanced very precariously, almost tipping forward. Can be very dangerous. So that's where extensor loops came around. Because of these are attached only here and here, what will happen if you push down in that sling is that loop will just slide backwards along the carry bar and the sling itself will recline. It will lay itself back. So obviously great for people that fidget, move around an awful lot. It does make it a lot safer. The downside to it is you can't control the position in that. It's very much down to the person in the sling, how their weight is distributed, how much they want to cooperate. So if you're going from bed to a chair and someone is laying flat out, you're never going to get them in a good position in that chair. Okay. And head support for slings. So you often see head support added to slings, and it's massive. It's sort of all the way up here. Great big thing that comes up around the head. I've not met many people that actually need that level of support. I haven't. What we tend to use instead is this pressy head support. It's only about that big, and all it does is it fills in the gap between the neck there. It comes with a little roll cushion that you can take in and out, and really that's the only support that a lot of people need. The benefit of it is you don't then have this massive piece of fabric that's getting in the way of people trying to do the transfer. They tend to work an awful lot tidier. So this is my favourite style of head support. And the reason I've shown you all those is because I'm about to make a very bold statement. If I were to design Lone Store's catalogue for slings, I think I could do it with just 5 slings, 5 different styles of sling, and that's what's represented here. So people that need to sit at the right of the spectrum, they need lots of support. There is no, hello, sorry. Yeah, so people that sit towards the right of the spectrum, use an in-seat sling. There's no reason not to. You know, you can use that hammock sling. It's going to work very well for most people. 2 different kinds with it. So I'm going to have one with extensor loops and one without, for obvious reasons. Some people will prefer one over the other. And that's really going to cover off everything for the right of the spectrum. Universal Deluxes, again the same story, one with extensor loops, one without. I honestly believe 90% of the people that I go and see for sling assessments, that's going to be absolutely fine for, it is. And the extra 10% that falls outside of that, that's why us sling reps are out there. You know, call us out for that sort of thing if you're not sure about it. And we can try the really special, the individual ones that have been made for niche scenarios. But yeah, as I say, a good 90% of people are going to be covered by this. I have included a toileting sling in there. As I say, we don't specify them very often, but some people they are appropriate for, so that's what I do. Okay. That's the end. Does anybody have any questions?